Oh, yeah, okay. Hello. I'm here today with Michael McNeely, who has a master's in education. And what was your master's in? Just to sort of give a brief overview.
I did my master's on teachers with disabilities and the accommodation practices
All right.
that they have. Mm-hmm. And whether or not they were comfortable enough with their disability identity to ask for accommodations.
All right, cool. So you're definitely somebody who's got a disability background and is familiar with disability studies and what we're talking about. So I've brought you in as an expert to have a conversation about Native Son. I'm going to show the video. Native Son. And this is our evidence that I've read the book. So we're going to have a conversation about, I think we've decided on 3 topics, right?
Three times.
Yes. Oh, and I forgot to set a timer. Oh, man.
That's okay.
So, first, maybe do you want to talk about what we were just talking about before we started recording? So you mentioned in the foreword, we were sort of given the impression that the character of Bigger Thomas would be unlikable.
Yes, and I always flag that because I don't want to be told how I should be feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm like, okay, what parts can I sympathise with Bigger Thomas? And just for the first part alone, because I'm a wee bit in a part of it, I found myself sympathising with him a great deal.
Yeah, there was a moment in the first part of the book where I found it really interesting, the sort of shift in perspective from storytelling, where it was a really vivid image of Bigger Thomas, I think, looking up at the sky, and it really put you in his position. Like it was something like describing how his eyelids opened, and I just felt like that was a really visceral way to put the reader in the place of Bigger Thomas.
Well, he wants to be a pilot, from my understanding, and I think I can sympathise with that because, of course, there might not be a lot of opportunities, maybe in the 1940s or 50s to practice flying.
Yeah.
But I know even now, even today, people may find themselves racialized and subjugated, and they might not be able to pursue their dreams. So I think that's something that we get now in 2016.
Yeah, and I think too, like shifting that to a disability perspective, it's a similar experience. Often being told like you can and cannot do certain things. Like I know I had a partner previously who wanted to be a pilot, and because he had an anxiety disorder, they like you can't do it. So.
Do you think Bigger Thomas has a disability?
That's a good question. I think that the culture around him definitely disabled him. I don't know. That's an interesting. I mean, it's kind of that question of what they were talking about with the Big Bang Theory of like, if you don't have like a specific diagnosis of a character, it's kind of like armchair psychology or whatever, trying to identify a character as having a disability.
And perhaps we could agree that he would have benefited from a culturally sensitive counsellor to talk to you about some of his problems.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think at the second part of the part 1, I think the big problem comes about where he questions people's motivations for having him as an employer in their household. So I was laughing because the father says, "Have you heard about an AACP?" And then he says, well, the father says, "It's supposed to help you people."
Yeah.
And then Bigger Thomas says, "I haven't." But then the father says, "Oh, it doesn't matter."
Yeah.
So I think the whole thing is very satirical about.
Yeah.
And if it's supposed to help you, then you should be hearing about it, and maybe the father should have been telling you about it, but instead he said it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and it's like this whole narrative of white people deciding what's best for black people, right?
Yes, that's right.
And also with the Marxist literature that he's given.
Yes.
And that, like, it's not just like, here's something that you might be interested in or you might relate to. It's like, you have to read this.
Yes.
Like, it's like he's giving him homework. It's like, he's still demanding of Bigger that he jump through a hoop, right? And, like, it's a hoop. It's that sort of, like, nefarious, insidious concept of, we know what's best for you. So it's like, oh, you poor thing.
And I think Bigger Thomas is in a position where he can't speak out against that. For fear of reprisal, for fear of losing his job. So he has to sit there and take it, and ultimately I sympathise with him when he ends up killing that girl, and I know that's bad, but it's just...
Yeah.
I don't want to say it, but she kind of had it coming in a way. Well, no, it was not really her fault. She couldn't do anything when she was being suffocated.
Yeah.
But when she was laughing at Becca Thomas, I didn't really like her that much at that time.
Yeah, that's 5 minutes.
Okay.
Well, I want to keep going a little bit.
Sure. You probably want to question my statement then.
Yeah, maybe I'm gonna, okay, I'll give us 2 more minutes.
You don't have to time it.
Well, because the file will be really big
Okay.
if we go too long. I agree with you. I think that her character was not very likable. I disagree that she had it coming because I think
No, I know.
I was actually kind of reminded of the end of of Mice and Men, when I think is George the big one, when George accidentally kills the woman. Do you remember that book?
No, I never went it.
Oh shit! I just spoiled.
That's okay.
But there's a character who has a mental disability. Like, he's intellectually not very quick.
George.
I think it's George, and then Lenny is his smaller friend. So there's a big guy and a little guy, and the big guy is the one who's intellectually not super with it. And he accidentally murders a woman, but it's sort of, he doesn't realize his own strength.
I understand.
And I think it's a similar thing where she's like screaming or something, and he's trying to just get her to be quiet, and he suffocates her. And so I saw there's a really big parallel with that.
Yeah, I can see that. I think it's the situation that led to her death. And so maybe she didn't have it coming, but the whole situation was pretty much, and the various one in which something bad is going to happen, and
well, and it was really unfair to him, right?
How you doing?
No.
Like, it was really unfair to have him in that situation.
I don't think anybody really understood what kind of situation he was in. And I just wanted to touch on briefly about what you thought about his relationship with that boy that he beat up at the
His
pool
friend.
hall.
Yeah. I
was
thought it was a
interesting.
really interesting study in violence in terms of like the motivating factors. And I think for me, like working in high schools, I see that so often where boys will act out aggressively, but it's like a way of covering something. And I don't know, I thought that was a really interesting, clever way to show that. That's 2 minutes.
No, it's,
What did you think about it?
I definitely thought it was good characterization, and it really made you think about the complexity of the character, because just a moment before, he was buddy with him, and then he was beating the shit out of him, so quite the transition there.
And I think there was a really interesting juxtaposition of that power that he had with that group of friends, and then the experience he has when he's with the white people. Where he goes from being really strong, really powerful, to like barely being able to talk and being really like drawn into himself.
I would maybe see him as not having much power in either context, because I think
True.
I think he lost all his power when he started beating on that guy, and I'm sure, yes, you can be physically powerful, but at the same time, he was supposed to be a leader, and he was supposed to plan that bank robbery, or that robbery of that thing, the newspaper thing. But I think he failed.
Yeah.
And then when he was walking back by himself, he passes that place and he says, "Oh, we could have done it. We had
there
enough
was
time."
But I think that was an interesting demonstration of that sort of duality that you have in your mind, where you act in a way and then later you kind of knew all along that you were self-sabotaging, right? Like, I think there was a lot of intentionality in that he was really afraid of taking that next step.
No, it's true. And then, but it was through his behaviour that he had been egging on everyone else. So ultimately, he was the one that created the situation in which anyone who backed out would have been a loser.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is an interesting study too, in like that hyper-masculinity and toxic masculinity that we talk about a lot more now in feminist communities too. All right, I'm gonna leave it there for now. So that was book 1, and then we'll be back for book 2. Thank you very much for being here.
Anytime.
Cool.